back to another episode of the Catholic Buzz, and we're so happy that you're joining us here today as we continue. And as you can see, we're very festive today. It's Halloween week, and I'm joined, as always, by the experts on all the things Catholic. Josh Sullivan over here.
Hello.
And the person I'm dressing up for as Halloween, Matt Van Milligan. Matt, welcome to you. This is my costume choice.
Oh, that's good.
Do you think it could pass? I need a wig or something.
Yeah, you might need a little more hair.
I know.
Very large prosthetic teeth.
Sweater vest.
A sweater vest.
Yeah.
A nice beard. Yeah. We had someone, remember? We had someone email us and tell us they like you better with a beard. Was it with or without a beard?
I don't remember.
Yeah, it was funny.
I think it's with, because now he's growing one out again.
He's trying to appeal his fans.
Of course.
It's probably my wife that wrote in.
Yeah.
It's an anonymous letter. We like him better with a beard. Yeah. So it's Halloween week. We, are people trick-or-treating?
It's such a hard thing with COVID right now. I don't know, Matt, are you guys doing trick-or-treating? Like, we normally...
Normally we put on costume. Like our kids are still really young, so it's like they usually dress up as an animal and we go to the farm.
You go to family.
Yeah.
See, for us, we stopped trick-or-treating a little bit ago. We still celebrate, have fun dressing up, but normally we'll do something. So sometimes it's go and hang out with friends, like have a Halloween party per se. But we did it before where we went trick-or-treating as a parent. I don't understand why parents do this. We go door to door, get sugar candy, and then we have to deal with kids on a sugar high and sugar crackers.
For like a week.
For months. For a month. Like, it depends on how much you... I got boys, so they run. I pretty much just, I dress up like a jogger so everyone thinks that I'm, really acting well in my costume, and I just sweat and kind of like breathe hard the whole way as I just kind of jog across the road, and they just kind of run house to house to house. But yeah, they get like pillowcases, like a pillowcase, 2 pillowcases full, and it's all candy and junk food. Like, why do I want them to eat that? Yeah. So what we do instead, we have a big party. Sometimes we still have gone out, but this year I think we decided that we're going to just have a big party at home, and then
just your fam,
just our family, and have fun with it. You know what I mean? We're also in the country now where I don't think a lot of trick or treaters are going to come.
True.
Like, I'm sure if I put a light out and put come to me for Halloween candy, they might. But
I might make the drive out there if you're giving out candy.
Yeah. Well, the closest neighbor to me is probably about half a kilometer one way or the other. So, it's pretty far distance. You're not walking to each house, let's just say.
Is that part of the decision to move out to the country? It's like, okay, so if you do 2 kilometers of trick or treating, your kids don't end up with a whole pillowcase full of candy.
6 little
that they have
of candy. You can eat it all tonight if you want.
Yeah. Before you were making the decision between like having like an annoying month or a horrible week.
Yeah.
Now it's like
it's a lot easier.
They're done with it that day.
That's it. What do you guys give out for Halloween usually? Like, do you give out? Or do you give out at all, or are you just out?
We're the Grinches of Halloween.
Yeah.
Like because we're not at home, so we just shut off the light. We don't even leave a basket out.
Yes, and I did that last year. I love Halloween for to give out candy, but last year I gave out candy because I think it was a Friday night last year, or it was close to the weekend, and I gave out candy, lots of candy at Mass on the weekend to all the kids and the schools too when I visited, and then the night of Halloween. The place was dark and whatever, and I was a Grinch. But
when we did go trick or treating, we would go trick or treating, and as good parents, so we go trick or treating with young kids. So from like 6 to 7, we go trick or treating, and then from 6:45ish to 7 o'clock, whenever we get home, then Chrissy and I we dump out the candy bags, we go through all the candies, and we would
check it.
And we put. I was gonna say we take some of the good taxes.
Exactly.
We call it taxes. We just take some of the good. We got to teach them about life, right?
Render unto Caesar.
Yeah, exactly. Render to Caesar's what is Caesar's, exactly. And then we would, anyways, but then we'd also take all the really crappy stuff that we didn't like, just the sugar candy, like just the purpose of it is for the kids to get high off sugar. So we take some of those ones, like the really cheap stuff, and we put it all in our giveaway bowl. And so then the teenagers always come between 7 and 8, and I would be giving out lots of candy, all this extra cheap candy.
Re-gifting.
Exactly. They were allowed to re-gifting all the Halloween.
You are the first person I've heard that's admitted to that.
No, we definitely do it.
You get your kids to go up between 4 and 6, so you can give out that.
I don't have to buy a lot of candy. Let me just tell you, my kids are great at it. No, but what they do is we tell them, okay, so pick it. So they normally get, they want to keep the chocolate bars, they want to keep this, but then you get some of those candies that are like not Tootsie's rolls, it's tutu rolls or something like
Yeah,
that, like the
yeah.
off-name brands. So you take all those out because you just don't know about those sometimes, right? You take all those out, and then that's what I give away. Like
so
all the questionable candy goes into the pot again, and
then the people who are coming to your house think you're the one giving the tutu rolls.
exactly.
Like, that guy gave us the cheap
I'm okay.
candy.
I moved away from there. They only think it for so long. Glad those guys moved away.
Gosh. You know what's funny? When I was a kid and we trick-or-treated, there was a priest who lived just 2 streets over from us. He ran Catholic Charities. His name was Father Brian McKee. And when we stopped at trick-or-treat at his house, at the Catholic Charities building, he would give like these full-size chocolate bars.
Yeah.
Like
Then you marked that house down, right?
Yeah. Every year it was like, we got to go to Father McKee's.
Yeah.
Like that's like on the stop, like big chocolate bars. And then one year he had like this big collection of like lollipops or suckers. Like it was like 15 of them in like tied up or whatever. And
That's what he gave it away.
Oh yeah. It was just
You marked those houses.
Yeah.
This is aging myself, but going back into like the early 90s, going trick-or-treating, I remember there was one house that always gave out something awesome. Like that wasn't like, it wasn't just
full
candy
can
or
of
like
pop.
like a little Tootsie Roll or something. One year, they gave out packs of magic cards, which itself isn't a big deal. But that was during the time, it was like 92 to 94, that this is like the alpha beta range of magic cards. And if you're a collector or something like that, you know that one of those booster packs now goes for about $5,000 to $10,000.
Couple grand,
That it's like if we had held on to those, or if we had any idea, if we had the gift of fortune telling, or like the Back to the Future, we could check the the price down the road. If you hold on to one of those in its original package, we were dumb. We just opened them up. Like, oh, what's that? Broken. But yeah.
Wow, that's something that they give that stuff out. Eh? Okay, so let's keep going there. So Halloween, obviously, we're talking today about ghosts, goblins, Halloween, saints, all the things, right? So let's start here. Halloween is actually a celebration that has religious roots, right?
Yeah.
So.
Okay, do you want me to go with where it came from at one time? So at one time, the Celtics had a celebration, which was the harvest, and then it was a celebration of all the fruits of the harvest, as well then going into the dark period of the year. So they knew it as the night period. And so it was at that time where we kind of went from light and life and everything else into a darker period during winter, where they believe that there's a veil between the living and the dead was the thinnest on this celebration of Samhain, is what they called it. And so that's where originally, now this is going back before, almost before, well, just after the time of Christ, around that area. So this is in the Celts. The Catholic Church decided, as they do a lot of times, this celebration of the dead is not necessarily a bad thing, but let's do it in the right way. And so Pope Gregory, I can't remember, I think it's the 10th. I can't remember.
7th century.
The 9th century. It was 9th century. Pope Gregory was the one that said, okay, let's make this feast for saints and all souls, and we're going to put it on November 1st and November 2nd, and that's what we're going to celebrate. So it's kind of adding, so let's just teach them the right way of doing this necessarily, or let's teach them why we should do this or how we should do this kind of thing. And so they opened up these sacrifices. So we had Hallowed Eve. So we had Hallowed's Day, and
which is All Saints Day.
All Saints Day.
All Hallows, All Holy,
exactly.
right?
And then so the time before that was known as Hallows Eve. And kind of what happened there was Hallows Eve was the time you weren't allowed to do anything wrong on Hallowed Day, right? Because it was a celebration of the church and stuff, and you were going to hell and you were going to be burned at the stake or whatever the case may be. Not really, but that's like the belief that you were getting struck by lightning. So they would do it the day before Hallowed Day, right? And so you could do whatever you wanted there. We don't care, but if you don't do it during this holy day. And so they would start to do things like the tricks and the treats and all that stuff, and probably what most of us have heard from the history channels and all that kind of stuff, which is like, okay, a trick or a treat, or you go around and get little soul cakes, right, given to us, or the time that ghosts and goblins were actually traveling around the world was at that. Well, kind of came from this tradition of the veil was really thin, and so it was at that time that the Celtic belief was that you could potentially see a ghost, or you could have seen something that was dead at this time because the veil was so thin. And part of that is just because it was really dark then and this is really light. And,
Right.
you know?
And you know what's really cool about this year is that this coming Sunday, the Feast of All Saints is actually on a Sunday.
That's great,
And
yeah.
so we celebrate it instead of like
every
in the
7
midst of
years
this
or
ordinary time. It's the Feast of All Saints, so we'll actually celebrate that on the Sunday, November 1st.
At one time, that used to be a holy day of obligation, was it not?
Of course, and it's I believe it still is in the United States.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's for some I know it is still, but not in Canada. But it was
I
at
believe
one
it
time.
is, and still in the United States. Yeah. Holy Day of Obligation. And then November 2nd, of course, Monday, is All Souls Day. But the whole month of November, we pray for the dead. The church reserves the month of November to pray for the dead. And so, yeah, I like what you were saying, because the night before, so that's how Halloween sort of got its start.
Hallowed Eve,
But
yeah.
people would dress up as their favorite saint sometimes, or as like a costume of some sort. Now it's kind of like costumes of all sorts of things and more
ghoulish, or even sexual in nature, or you know what I mean, like
and
just,
even more like
it's just a chance to get up. To
yeah,
dress up.
even more like more what's the word, like very gory, I guess.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, like bloody,
The
and
gorier the
horrific.
better.
horrific.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know. So that, but it had its roots of people really dressing up as their favorite saint.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah, and I think you think about it too, like people dressing up, it's fun, but then as everything does, you have to push the boundary. So then it gets pushed in all sorts of ways. So hey, look at like you see someone, imagine going, seeing way back in the day, someone with a sheet over their head walking through the field, you'd be like, what the heck is going on here? You over and so there is some attention, but then it gets bigger and it gets bigger and get bigger. Till now the point, like people are now starting to dress up their houses like they do Christmas time like they. I think probably a month ago, 2 months ago, my neighbors started dressing up their house for
decorating,
Halloween. Decorating with lights and smoke and everything. And I was just like, wow, impressive. They do a really good job of it, but it's impressive. You know what I mean?
There is a bit of historical irony as well, that as you were saying, that the church took something that the secular culture was doing and saying that, okay, here's the good that we can find in that, or that we can direct these people to, like a proper understanding, appreciation of the dead, of saints. That in the 20th century you have kind of a reappropriation of
the commercial flipping.
All Saints Day and All Souls Day
Yeah.
being like commercialized, and just like, Nestle is loving Halloween.
Yes.
People who are making
chocolates,
horror movies and all these other things are like that. You have to be aware of kind of like the market influence on what Halloween has become.
So true. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about sort of what people expect from Halloween today, which is more horrific in nature. So what does the church teach about ghosts and spirits and all these sort of things that are sort of attached today with Halloween? Like what can we say to people who, because we do celebrate All Saints, we celebrate All Souls, we're praying for the dead. We talked about how people used to think the veil between the dead and the living was thin in this time, at this time, right? So what does the church say? Do we believe in ghosts?
I'm going to say I think yes. Not necessarily that they do exist. Who, what, where, when, why would be the other question I think that the church would have to get into. But I'm going to say, like, the Saint Padre Pio used to talk to, I'm going to say ghosts, but it's something that the church has proven. And so a couple things that happened, just to get into him 2 seconds. He was told he wasn't allowed to celebrate Mass for the public. This is one of the stories that go along with his as a saint. And he wasn't allowed to celebrate Mass in the public, and he was only allowed to celebrate Mass. So he was, in a monastery, he would celebrate Mass on the chapel on the hill. And he put a lot of restrictions on him because some awesome things were happening, and the people in charge just wanted to keep him under wraps, make sure that things weren't happening inappropriately. The abbot, I believe, from the monastery, who had given him the order not to celebrate Mass in public, came out one time and heard the miraculous singing from a church as if a full Sunday worship service was going on, and he said, but instead of going like, what the heck's going on with the chapel on the hill, he knew that Padre Pio was actually celebrating on the hill, celebrating Mass. And so him and some people, he yelled to some other friars, and they all went up the hill to not arrest, but to affront Padre Pio. And they could hear the singing, like they said, multiple people singing on beautiful voices, but singing. And they burst into the church to stop Mass from happening because he had said that he's not supposed to Mass.
Right.
And the entire church was empty. It was just Padre Pio there, and he was in the middle of holding up the Eucharist in the transubstantiation, the consecration, and he had been there for about 15 minutes, just holding up. And so what they heard were the choirs of angels and saints and stuff on earth, though, singing. So there's some things there that are kind of outside of the spiritual realm. But then also Padre Pio is known to be having conversation like this, and then just being like, "Oh, yes, I will pray for you. Go ahead, brother." And then just go back to a normal conversation. And the monks in the monastery just got used to Padre Pio having these side conversations with people that weren't there. And when they investigated it was people going to purgatory. Like when they talked to him about it was people going to purgatory and he was deemed not crazy. Like he wasn't crazy. He was actually seeing something, and he was actually having these conversations. But even to the point of where he would be able to hold a conversation and then say, pray for somebody, and then tell you that this ghost just said something about you. You know what I mean?
I mean, he would be a really intimidating spiritual director. You know.
Yeah.
But Josh makes a good point, because like we believe in things visible and invisible.
Yeah.
Right? That's part of the teaching of our faith. We believe in things visible and invisible right from the day of our baptism. Things visibly happen to us at our baptism and invisibly happen to us at our baptism. So things that are invisible, like spirits or ghosts running around. We were talking, Matt, today before we went on the air about the scripture, right? Jesus, when he's walking on the water, what did Peter say when he looked up? He said, it's a ghost, which means, I mean, it wasn't a ghost, it was Jesus. But for him to say it's a ghost means that they were familiar with ghosts. They were, they knew about this, and they were familiar that ghosts could exist, right? Yeah. So that's even from the time of Jesus, right?
Yeah. Well, and like to come back to the question too about whether or not ghosts exist, or whether or not we believe in ghosts. That when we were talking about this beforehand, or like considering this as a topic, I was kind of like, I don't know, this is kind of out of my wheelhouse, or this is not something that I've given a lot of thought or kind of study to. But that even Josh's point that we believe in souls, that it's what we understand as ghosts, maybe the souls in purgatory, or moments, or miraculous moments where the divide between heaven and earth is broken down. That's kind of the safe catechetical answer that I would give. But kind of beyond that, there's a lot of what secular society would mean by ghosts, and kind of how the church understands what happens to souls when they die.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to realize that that God permits these things, right? That God can permit someone who's in heaven or purgatory to sort of make an appearance to someone on earth, right? That they don't do it from their own volition, that they don't have the power in and of themselves to just appear to someone. Right?
It's on God's authority and God's power, right? That it's happening, and I think that breaks the divide between how come ghosts appearing, or maybe a saint appearing, or something, Mary appearing, or whatever. Yeah. And that happening is okay, but then trying to summon a spirit or summon a thing is wrong. Like divination through the eyes of the church is wrong. So why is this not wrong? And I think that this is on God's authority. This is happening, but this one here is us trying to take control or take power or take,
Exactly. And I think it's a good time to remind people too, because during this time of Halloween, there's a lot more interest in things like Ouija boards and summoning the dead, that stuff is wrong, that we don't do anything to conjure up evil spirits or...
And the occult practices are real. Like there are occult practices. There are groups out there that practice occult. Have like the Black Mass that we've heard about before, and all those kind of things. Like those are people specifically trying to worship the devil, and the devil is a real entity, right? It's a real being. So we have to believe that as a church, because if we didn't believe that, then there would be no hell, and then what's the point of Jesus, and what's all that stuff. So it happens. So. Realizing that sometimes those occult practices are put into games and put into things that are commercialized or whatever, but they're still dangerous.
And realizing that a good measure of discernment is required. So there's okay, does that mean that Halloween is a complete write-off because there's an increased interest in these things, in the occult, in that like our kids dressing up as a giraffe and a horse or something like that. That's pretty harmless.
Are you going to?
Yes.
But then it's like you do have interest in like people pursuing actually demonic things in some cases, but also that there's a middle ground that requires some discernment. So if your kid wants to dress up as a hobbit, that there are kind of like fantasy elements that they're like, that's probably pretty harmless, especially since something like Lord of the Rings is overtly Christian imagery.
Yeah,
It was like, but you can dress like a wizard, you can dress because you're not giving any credence to these things beyond what they're due.
Yeah. And I think too, it's important to think about that too. Is like I remember growing up was like you could only dress as a saint. No, that's not necessarily the way the church. Right? You're not going to hell if you celebrate Halloween. In fact, it is a hallowed Eve Christian type holiday. But there is actually a part just to bring before Halloween is the night of Devil's Night. And I know that's something to bring forward because that's where when you're talking about dark magic and the occult and all that kind of stuff, it's one of that's their Christmas, if you will. And it's actually known, like police know it. The Knights of Columbus used to, when we had the Precious Blood Sisters here in North Bay, was a time that the Precious Blood Sisters Monastery was always attacked the night before Halloween. And so the Knights of Columbus would go out there and stand vigil around the Precious Blood Monastery to protect them from just getting a window smashed. Like there's a bunch of nuns just praying, but that's the attack. A weird place to attack, but always on Devil's Night. And churches too sometimes get attacked, and whatever the case may be. But it's an actual known thing. So knowing that there are practices out there and stuff that are completely contrary to All Hallow Day, right? So to make weary and not be supportive of that. But like you said, getting dressed up as a giraffe or getting dressed up as whatever, it's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, and I think it's okay, like this, especially this time of year, to have an interest in those things, like evil spirits and all that stuff, And I think obviously there's a natural curiosity about those things too in our lives, right? But you're right, there is a way of dealing with them. Sometimes they become an obsession. Sometimes they become more of a, more than just a curiosity. People fall into this lure of exciting evil things. Like. I get asked all the time about exorcisms and evil, and people are fascinated by it, whereas I find God more fascinating, right? But students like to ask me more about evil and things like that. So, but while we're curious about evil, we have to also recognize that, yes, evil exists.
It's really good.
Yeah.
So let's be careful, everyone. Like, let's not fall into a trap. Let's we have to be on guard of it, really, more than anything else.
Yeah, and on the one hand, like there is actual kind of benefit of having a season where you're more aware of kind of spiritual realities than like even something like some of the Exorcist movies.
Yeah.
It was like involved really detailed and heavy consultation from actual exorcists within the church.
Yeah.
That it's like people are actually trying to represent spiritual realities. In an entertaining way, but also in a way that kind of brings people's attention to it.
Realizing that the church actually like the Catholic Church has exorcists. So realizing that these things are real, right? Like this is not something, and I mean that the movies are on them and stuff, and like you said, they actually talk to real life exorcists, but like, this is not just a fun thing. This is.
It's not entertainment.
It's not. It's not entertainment. I mean, as much as it can be on a nice movie, but yeah, these are real. These are so keeping that. On the same flip side, realizing, and this is something my mom used to always tell me growing up, is realizing that who holds the power. Yeah. And so God holds the power, and the devil can only twist. He can't create. He can only twist. And so he can twist your thoughts. He can twist an explanation, or he can twist that. And he can grab something good and holy, and he can twist it and make it evil. But he can't. So he can't create anything. He can't do that. And so who holds the power? God holds the power. God can create. God is bigger. God created the angel that fell. You know what I mean? And so if you were ever to get scared or anything about any of this stuff that we're talking about, is realizing too that God has that power. And all you have to do, say St. Michael prayer, say a Hail Mary. Yeah. Make the devil realize, if the devil starts taking those things and twisting it, make him realize that you realize who won and who is winning. But like even that God gave Mary the authority, the woman, to stomp out the heel of the snake, and all that stuff is just to make all that realized. So saying a Hail Mary, saying St. Michael prayer, and just asking God to be present.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, like we talked about this on a previous episode about how people who are into the black masses and Satanists, they come in and they even believe in the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist.
Yeah.
Where on stuff like you mentioned, like Devil's Night and all these spooky things, where are they attacking? Holy places.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so even in their evil actions and in evil intentions, there's still this recognizing of a holy realm, you know, like sometimes more so than maybe Christians or things, you know, like
On the day after.
Yeah, they don't attack supermarkets, they don't
No,
attack libraries.
exactly.
It's these holy sites, these holy places, right, on these nights, because there does exist this battle of good and evil,
invisible realm.
this invisible realm that we talked about, visible and invisible. Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot. We're celebrating All Saints Day this Sunday. Who's your favorite saint?
Who's my favorite saint? Three-way tie.
Okay, I was just gonna say, is there like a couple of favorites?
Augustine, Saint Augustine. No, four-way tie.
Wow.
We shouldn't give Matt too much time because he's got 16-way tie, 25-way tie.
There's a problem with the question. No, no. Okay, so yeah, Saint Paul, Saint Augustine, Saint Francis Xavier, and Aquinas.
Yeah, and those, like, I'm not surprised by your choices because those are some people who you've really like studied and read. And St. Francis Xavier, obviously, you got the ring on.
Go, X, go.
But also, that's the middle name of your newest child.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, Michael Francis Xavier.
Yes, but let's do a quick plug. Francis and Francis Xavier is for St. Francis de Sales, who's my wife's one of her favorite saints. And Xavier is for Francis Xavier.
Because he's one of your favorites.
Yeah. So, but we got both
And
in
your
there
alma mater.
with Francis Xavier.
Favorite saints?
Okay, I'm going to go with four-way tie too.
Oh, really?
But here's why. I have patron saints for everything, right? But Padre Pio is one of my favorite saints.
Okay, yeah,
That's a
mine
big one.
too.
Saint Joseph, teach me how to be a man. So that's one of the ones. And Saint Therese and I, Lisieux, we've had always a tight connection. But the new one is Blessed Carlo.
Oh my gosh, I know.
I
Since our conversation about him like a couple weeks ago, I've been praying for his intercession every day as well.
And so Carlo, I mean, for those of you who hadn't seen that episode, is a young guy back in, when was it, the 90s?
No, he died in 2006.
2006.
That was like 14 years ago.
Yeah, and so
when I had
computers
hair.
and stuff like that. Yeah, me too. But being a computer science professor, that's what I do. That's one of those, like, I would love to have we don't have a saint of computers or anything else. We have some, potentials. But he's my first one that I go, oh, I connect with this guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so he's only blessed now. But he'll be a saint pretty quick, I know it.
Yeah,
and
for
so,
sure.
But he's going to be one of my new favorites.
Like just telling his story. Like this week we had a whole bunch of teenagers. We showed the video and they love this story and they ask questions and they're like, he was younger than me or older than me and all this stuff. Like I could do that too. It's just very inspiring. So yeah, my favorites right now. Yes, definitely. I have some classic favorites too.
I was going to do a five-way tie.
Oh,
but I didn't want to steal. You're
my main guy.
JP2.
Yeah, I know.
This week.
I said say Saint Padre Pio. Blessed Carlo Acutis, and then the guy we just celebrated a few days ago, his feast day on October 22nd is Saint John Paul II. Saint John Paul II. I saw him in person. He was about this distance away from me, and it's just a real blessed time. So yeah. Okay, cool. And I think it's really important to remind people that the month of November is to pray for the dead, pray for the souls in purgatory, pray for all those who have died. And so maybe that's a challenge. We haven't given it a challenge in a long time, to go and to pray for those people who have gone before us.
And part of that too, because the month of November, we're closing down the chapter of the year, right?
Exactly.
And so we're finishing, as we do with all the intentions, as we do with everything, we pray for the dead last to make sure that there's a focus.
Yeah, for sure. And just for people to enjoy Halloween in whatever way they can this year. But
you're not going to hell if you celebrate.
Exactly. Just don't get too caught up in all the horrific side of it. And most importantly, we can't forget that if you're going trick-or-treating, you just save me some candy, right? Yes, any candy, not the stuff you save.
I got a whole bowl ready for it.
If you have any questions for us about Halloween or any of these topics we talked about today, drop us a line as thecatholicbuzzpodcast@gmail.com. For Josh Sullivan and Matt Van Milligan, I'm Father Daniele. We'll see you on the next episode of The Catholic Buzz. Happy Halloween.